You are the host of Philly Homicide, a TV show on Oxygen. Bring us up to date on that, some of the episodes, and maybe one or two that may be coming up in the near future.
Yeah, we're now in season 2 of Philly Homicide, which is very exciting. We were greeted, with a lot of support in season 1, and we even got nominated for a Critics' Choice Award out of the gate in season 1, which I thought was fantastic. But we're back with season 2. We're about 7 episodes in now, and getting good feedback from it, which I'm very happy to hear.
Obviously, the name of the show, these are cases, these are murder cases that occur not just within the city limits of Philadelphia, but obviously the suburbs, the counties surrounding it. So I know, and you were involved in some of them. Ray, you were involved in one of the episodes last year in season 1, right?
I was. It
Episode
was,
1 of season 1, yeah.
yeah, the very first one. It was regarding the homicide of a Chester police officer, Mike Beverly.
Corporal Beverly, right.
Mhm. Chris, how does the production change when you transition from being boots on the ground investigator to a narrator guiding a national audience through some of these cases?
It's definitely a different role. My biggest thing, and I may sound like a broken record, I may have said this before, but when I was first approached about doing this show, I wanted to make sure that it was just a very organic way of telling these stories. I didn't want any type of over embellishment or over dramatizing things. I just really wanted to be able to tell the stories in a way that showed the dedication of the investigators involved, the police, the federal agents like yourself, and the prosecutors, and just how they have to dig down and how hard it really is. Because as we all know, justice does not come easy. I mean, yeah, it's illegal to kill somebody, but it doesn't mean you're going to get justice. It's very difficult, and I wanted to show that while at the same time giving the family, friends, loved ones of the victims a platform from which they could talk about their loved one, so that a lot of people could hear them, that they could sit there, and a lot of them said that they found it to be a somewhat part of their healing process. I don't think you ever heal from that, but that they found that it was almost cathartic for them to be able to talk about that person. And that's really what I wanted. I wanted to show respect for the victims and their families, and just show how hard the people in the criminal justice system work. And I think we've been doing a good job of that.
I agree. Fitz and Chris, you mentioned something, Chris, about how the locals come together with the federal investigators. And how does that really align? Now, you've had the opportunity and you've known Fitz and I, but working some of these cases, is it real easy, or does it work well when the locals come together with the feds, or is there difficulties involved there?
If there's a relationships already established and in place, I'd say yes. But sometimes out of the gate, when you don't know one another, I think sometimes it's pretty easy to get off to a rough start.
Well, where do the investigations align? Where do they come together?
Well, they have a common goal, right? I mean,
True.
I think you need to establish that really fast out of the gate. It's not I always used to like to say, if you could take the egos out of police work, things would go a lot smoother sometimes.
Good point.
Yeah.
And,
So, I mean,
and the bosses too, some of them.
yeah. I mean, my answer to your question, Ray, would be that should be done right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have a sit down. Let's get on the same page.
I agree.
Yeah.
Really had a problem on a task force. Like I said, the big bosses, sometimes their egos will get ruffled. But I think when I was a FBI agent and even a profiler later, but first 7 years in New York, I tried to let it come out early on, working with NYPD or Westchester PD, other PDs we'd be working a case with, that, oh yeah, by the way, I was a cop for 11 years. And I think not every agent can do that. It doesn't mean you're not a good agent if you weren't a cop beforehand. But sometimes if I go there and talk a little bit of the cop lingo, even though I was a smaller PD than NYPD, I think right away when they know you wore the uniform, that kind of helps a bit. And this rumor that the feds are just here to steal your case, well, that certainly never happened on my watch, and it wouldn't happen otherwise. And Ray and I have talked about the Nancy Guthrie case enough. Who knows what happened down there when the FBI came into the sheriff's department there, and it seems like some feathers were ruffled. I would stay with probably more on the boss's level than anything else, but that's for a whole other story. But going back in time, let's talk about this episode that's going to be airing on June 20th on the Oxygen Network of Philly Homicide, and involves a 1975 case that Ray and I were involved in at the 25-year point. So I'll make it clear we're not quite that old that we were in law enforcement in 1975, although I was a rookie police officer in 1976. But we weren't involved in this case from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and it involved a young woman, 19 years old, named Lindy Sue Beechler. I think that's how it's pronounced. Is that right, Chris?
I think it's Beekler.
Beechler. Okay.
Beekler.
Beekler. You don't want me to
And
tell you where I was in 76, do you?
no, no, thank you. But thanks for the offer nonetheless. So you're not that much younger than us, okay? But just we
Well, I
weren't in
can
high
tell you
school
where
at
I
the same time.
was. I wasn't a rookie anywhere, so
Yeah,
I was
okay.
in
So I'm older
college.
than you guys.
I know
And
you are. I respect my elders.
yeah, you do.
As do I.
With that in mind, back in 2000, Ray, I know the Lancaster Police Department reached out to you to do what we always suggested as profilers. If a case is unsolved, and certainly a violent crime case, at the 20, well, it could be the 10-year, like an even number, 20 or 25 quarter century mark, let's reinvestigate it. Let's bring in every asset we can. And Ray, do you remember the PD contacting you? Because Lancaster is out of the Philadelphia division. And why don't you go ahead, and they contacted you to do what?
That's why I was mentioning this earlier, Chris, when the feds and the locals come together and where the case aligns. You're right. We have a common goal here. And they came to me and they said, hey, look, we have this case. We have, we've exhausted it. We're coming up on 25 years. Is there any way for you guys to take a look at this and give us an assessment, a profile on this? And I said, yeah. I said, let's put it together. And putting it together and talking to them and being in the PD with them and looking at the files and then taking all those files and sending them down. And I sent them down to Jim, who happened to be the profiler that had responsibility for the Philadelphia territory. That's one of his areas. He was more of the Mid-Atlantic, but the Philadelphia area. And Jim looked at it and he says, hey, let's set up a meeting and bring these guys down. And that's what we did. And I tell you what, that is, to me, is the most fun I usually have, is working a case like that with guys that are trying to solve something that's a cold case. I've always had a special place in my heart for a cold case because, nobody else is working that. Nobody else cares, or they're worried about something else. Yet there's still somebody out there. There's still families out there. There's still victims out there that are struggling and saying, hey, am I ever going to get an answer to this?
Right.
And Jim and I eventually, I like to think we help contribute to what happened in this case in the long run, but we will leave that for a little bit later in the story, or we'll leave it till the show comes out and people get a chance to see it.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I'm the same way. I've always been very passionate about solving cold cases. At times I used to sometimes even take some heat for it, but that's okay.